afternoon, Cougar Nation, and welcome on in to a new edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. And it's always powered by KSLSports.com. I'm back from a vacation, so I'm rejuvenated, I'm energized, I'm ready to get back at it here on the Cougar Tracks podcast. 82 days from today, BYU football will kick it off against the South Florida Bulls to begin the last season of football independence. After independence is over, well then, BYU kicks off its era in the Big 12 Conference, and in 2023, they'll be joined by fellow newcomers that season. We'll be discussing that here on the podcast today. You can follow me on Twitter at Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports on all social media platforms, and we'll go in that direction. Along with discussing the new Big 12, my one-on-one interview with Senior Associate Athletic Director Liz Darger on what the Big 12 Conference will do for BYU's Olympic sports and more with football and men's basketball as they ramp up for the new era in the Big 12. Also discussing on today's podcast, BYU's running back room and the new BYU baseball coach. But we'll start things off with the Big 12 Conference. As July 1, 2023, let the countdown begin. BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston will all be joining the conference beginning on July 1, 2023. It's an exciting time for the Big 12 because this is a league that needed some clarity to move forward with its scheduling. And now they can. Now they know Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, they're all in for 2023. And they're getting out of the American Athletic Conference for what I think is a pretty good deal. They're going to pay $10 million before 2024, according to the Houston Chronicle, and then $8 million over the next 12 years after that. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. And it creates a situation where the Big 12 is going to be a 14-team league beginning in 2023, potentially also in 2024. We'll discuss that with Texas and Oklahoma a little bit later. This new Big 12 is a fascinating conversation because the Big 12 just distributed with 10 members $42.9 million per school for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. A lot of money, record distribution numbers for the Big 12. And many in the college football media are already forecasting this new Big 12 will have revenues cut by 50%. I think the AP even said that. That's a little bit of an extreme take. There might be some TV dips, potentially, but my argument still is that there's still a strong market for live sporting events in this era where no one watches television live. I mean, do you ever watch TV programming live anymore? I don't, unless it's a sporting event. It's the only time I watch live television. So to me, it's still a possibility that a TV network or a streaming service, but still probably a linear network, a combination of the two, is going to overpay. Live sports inventory is valuable. And what people forget, too, when the media starts to say the new Big 12 is going to make no money, it's going to have no revenue, those distributions from the $42.9 million is not just TV money. It's also from NCAA tournament shares. Big 12 Conference is the best basketball league in America. So you're talking about the shares within the league. That's just being dispersed amongst league members. Is the basketball league going to suddenly dip with these new members? Is Kansas going to become an afterthought? Is Baylor going to be an afterthought? No. Is BYU suddenly going to go in the tank? Maybe. I doubt it, though. Houston looks like a juggernaut waiting to happen. They're going to explode in the Big 12. UCF got potential, probably a bottom feeder in basketball. But NCAA tournament distributions and shares make up a big portion of that $42 million. Also, the Sugar Bowl connection. The Big 12 champ plays in the Sugar Bowl. It's about $30 million. So there's a lot of money still to be had in the new Big 12, even when Texas and Oklahoma leave. And that departure date is still June 30th, 2025. So this notion that suddenly the $42.9 million is going to be cut by 50%, that's silly talk. It's not going to happen like that. It's just not. And I still think that there's going to be quite a bit of money to be had in the TV space, because if CBS is as aggressive as some would believe, where they want to have double headers potentially in their lineup, they might be willing to overpay for the Big 12. I think Fox is going to be involved with the Big 12 potentially. So I don't think it'll be interesting to see how ESPN factors in. Obviously, Bob Bowlesby had his hot takes accusing ESPN of collusion with the Texas and Oklahoma bit. It's hard to imagine ESPN being involved with the Big 12, but hey, crazier things have happened in this league. Navigate, the research firm that projects these sort of things, a couple months ago, they put out projections for the leagues going forward up until 2029. And Navigate projects $51.9 million to be dispersed to all the Big 12 members beginning in 29. So there's going to be climbs. The issue will be the SEC and the Big 10 are going to have just a massive gap. But how close will the Big 12 be to the Pac-12 and ACC? I think it's going to be very close, and there's a potential for how successful these teams could be. They could pass up the Pac-12 and the ACC. Last time a Pac-12 team won a men's title in basketball, 1997. Last time a Pac-12 team won a football title, USC, 2004. They're not winning much at all. The Big 12 is winning titles in basketball. Football, still a long way to go. But in basketball, they're winning titles. And there's a lot of money to be had in that NCAA tournament. And if the basketball tournament goes to a power conference structure, there could be more money to be had, because then you're talking about more teams being involved in the power conference basketball tournament. That's down the road. That's been kicked around because of the NCAA allowing more autonomy to Division I and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of money in the Big 12 conference. So when I saw after this news of UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston getting out of the AAC and moving into the Big 12 in 2023, and people are just claiming, the money's just going to just be a massive dip, I disagree. It's still a massive conversation, though, for the Big 12 board of directors, and it's a big concern. There's optimism, though, around the league coming out of the spring meetings about, the research, the reach within the league for 18 to 44-year-olds. What does that mean? Who knows? There's optimism. And I think that this conference is going to be entertaining. It's going to be a quality product. And I think, again, and I've said before on previous podcasts, the Big 12 conference has to be flexible with its scheduling and be willing to play on Thursdays, Fridays, be the league that is just in windows where you're getting the most potential exposure. Go through all four windows, 10 a.m., 1:30, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, do it all. Do whatever it takes to get the most reach and have the best potential value for your next TV deal. Texas and Oklahoma's departure is significant. And there was a report from the Austin American-Statesman, Brian Davis. He stated one high-ranking Texas source says 2024 is still a more realistic target date for the Sooners and the Longhorns to leave for the SEC. That's no surprise. I even mentioned as much when I was at the spring meetings on the Zone Sports Network and KSL, that's kind of the sweet spot, it would seem, for Texas and Oklahoma to leave. So 1 year in the Big 12 conference with BYU, UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati, and then go to the SEC. The reason for that is because ESPN takes over the SEC deal in 2024. And I have to imagine ESPN wants their 16-team SEC from day one. So I think we're definitely going to get 1 year of the Longhorns and the Sooners. Second year, probably more doubtful, but there's still a grant of rights in play where you're talking about 9 figures, upwards of 9 figures. If Texas and Oklahoma were just ready to pay that fee because they can, it's not negotiable. If they wanted to pay their grant of rights fee, they could exit out today. Clearly, there isn't an appetite for that. And Oklahoma AD Joe Castiglione, someone who's been a mentor to Tom Holmoe, worked with him on the NCAA basketball selection committee, he was asked at the spring meetings, what would it take for Texas and Oklahoma to leave early for the SEC? And this is what he had to say.
Not that I'm aware of. Is it, possible, I guess? Then you have to ask other people. But right now we've been in meetings. We're voting members. We're talking about future schedules, planning that not just this coming year, but the 23-24, 24-25 seasons. Nothing has been completely established here, but there were a lot of conversations about scheduling models, formats, those kinds of things.
It's a weird structure. I mean, BYU is experiencing that with the WCC. Last week, Tom Holmoe was in San Diego with Liz Darger discussing the WCC scheduling opportunities in the West Coast Conference. So it is weird. And having Texas and Oklahoma there for at least 1 year, but right now, as far as it is, 2 years, ESPN would probably have to get involved. Lawyers would have to get involved to make that early exit happen. It's going to be a league with 14 teams, and I got to imagine that the newcomers are excited. And if you're the Big 12, to me, you put the Sooners and the Longhorns up against those newcomers. And some of them got to be in Austin and some in Norman, and I think Cougar fans are okay with that. And I don't think any BYU fan's going to scoff at the chance to go to Norman for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I know I wouldn't. I've never been to Norman. BYU's never been there. That would be sweet. It'd be cool to see, Norman, Oklahoma, see University of Oklahoma up close in person. But you got to have the newcomers play those teams because that could be some great data to then sell to the TV partners. Hey, look at what Cincinnati did to Texas. They handled them, like hypothetically. That's some stuff you can take to the table for your media executives and sell potentially. The negotiations for TV rights in the Big 12 begin in February 2024, I believe. And that's where, so you got the 2023 year to say, let's ramp this thing up, and here's some great data to show what these teams can be going forward in this new era of the Big 12 Conference. One of the leaders for BYU is Liz Darger, Senior Associate Athletic Director at BYU. And I caught up with Liz discussing the future in the Big 12 Conference and what it's going to do for women's sports and Olympic sports at BYU as they join the Big 12 coming up in July 1st, 2023. This was my conversation with Liz Darger from the Big 12 spring meetings a couple weeks ago out in Irving, Texas.
KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. Coverage continues here from Irving, Texas, suburb of Dallas, for the Big 12 spring meetings. And joining me now is Senior Associate Athletic Director, Women's Administrator at BYU, Liz Darger. And Liz, how's it feel being here at the Big 12 spring meetings? Just 7 years ago, you're coaching at UVU women's basketball team, and now you're here at the Big 12.
It's definitely been quite a journey, but no, it feels great. Just thinking of the last 9 months and to now be here and meeting people face to face and having conversations and talking through scheduling and branding and how things are going to look with the Big 12. It's a little bit surreal, but loving it. These are great people, and we're just thrilled to be a part of it.
These last 9 months, have you been able to, enhance or enhance these relationships with these future members in this Big 12?
Yeah, we've all been working on getting to know each other better, and certainly meeting in person helps move that along for sure. And so Tom and I and and Coach Satake and Coach Pope were able to be in Phoenix a few weeks ago and meet some of these folks. And then now to be here again with President Worthen and David Hart, our faculty athletic rep, it's great to make these connections and solidify them. We also had the Big 12 senior staff on our campus a few months ago. So yeah, we feel like there's some really good momentum now in building these relationships.
What's maybe been some of you mentioned the meetings in Arizona, the Fiesta Frolic. What's been maybe some of the differences between that and these meetings here in Dallas?
Yeah, the meetings in Scottsdale were largely focused on football, men's and women's basketball in terms of those coaches and engaging those coaches. These meetings are more business meetings, and each of us meet in our various groups. I meet with the other senior women administrators for quite a bit of the time. The presidents meet, the ADs meet, and the faculty athletic reps meet, and then we all meet together in various committees. So we're this is more logistical and actually getting business done, voting on things, the future of the conference, and how we move forward.
What has you excited about the business side of the Big 12 going forward when BYU does join on July 1, 2023?
Oh gosh, I don't know what doesn't have me excited. Really, we are just thrilled. Every part of it as we hear about plans, as we get to know our great colleagues, as we get to know their campuses and what they are all about. This is just such a great fit for us. It will be so great for our student athletes to be able to have the chance to compete at the very highest level, to compete for Big 12 championships and NCAA championships. Really, just thrilled about being partners with the Big 12 and these institutions. There's not one negative I can think of. We're absolutely thrilled.
What is this going to do for women's sports at BYU? I know day one of these meetings, the women's basketball tournament was a topic that was discussed quite a bit. What is this going to do for BYU women's sports?
One of the things I love with the Big 12, as we've been discussing, is how much they care about Olympic sports and women's sports, women's basketball being the premier sport, but the other women's sports as well. They put a lot of resources and attention and time into figuring out how to position the women's sports the best to make deep runs in the NCAA tournament. And so for our sports, we've got really strong women's athletic teams. And you look at women's volleyball, cross country, track and field, golf, softball, soccer, on and on and on, basketball, and the success of those teams. And now to be able to compete in regular season with the Big 12 and competing for Big 12 championships, it will prepare our teams really, really well to make deep runs in the NCAA tournament. We've had great competition in the WCC, but now to be able to week in and week out play these outstanding programs for our women's teams, it will be huge. I think it'll help prepare us better to make deep runs in the NCAA tournament.
When you and Tom and the athletic department are planning the future of the Big 12 to try and level up, as Tom has noted, what are going to have to be some things that need to be done for the Olympic sports to maintain this high level of success? Because the athletic department is among the best in the Learfield Cup standings right now. What's going to take to continue that in the Big 12?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're already the past 9 months and the next year, we've been meeting with every area of our department, and we're meeting with every coaching staff, and we're talking through those things. Where are their gaps? Where are the things resources that will be helpful to make sure our coaching staffs have what they need to be successful? So it's looking at all sorts of things. It's looking at facilities. It's looking at how we travel. It's looking at our staffing. It's looking at the resources we provide our student athletes. So we're trying to look at every angle of each of our coaching staffs and our programs and our department, where we feel like we always maximize the resources we have, and we will continue to do that. And so we want to be very strategic, and as we look to add and fill gaps, what we've done thus far is we've been very successful. And so we won't be changing that philosophy, and our coaching staffs won't be changing a lot of those philosophies on maximizing resources that we have. But certainly we need to pour in more resources and look at those areas to make sure that we enter the Big 12 in a position of strength.
When you mention facilities, Tom's said in the past that could take 5 to 10 years. That looking long term with these projects, is there anything in the short term that could be on the horizon?
Oh, I think you're always looking for little things here and there that can help. And so as we look at every program, we'll be meeting with our coaching staffs in the next month to talk about some of their needs. We'll see what needs they foresee. If there are things that we can do in the short term, we absolutely want to tackle those. But certainly there are long-term plans as well for our facilities.
What's the next steps after these meetings? It's going to be July 1st, 2023 before we know it. What's the next steps between now and July 1, 2023?
I think we just keep going with the research we've been doing. We've done a lot of research and looking at those areas we need to fill in. In our department, we've been adding a lot of new employment opportunities. Anyone that's kind of been following can see that there have been new jobs that have opened up, and that will continue. And we'll just continue to analyze every area of it. And really, I think also working with our coaches, helping them feel the support of us so that they feel like they have what they need to be successful as we go in. But also our student athletes and helping them prepare. I'm not sure that any of us truly know what we're in for. And so we want to prepare the best we can physically and mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually to make sure that we are ready to be our best and ready to represent Brigham Young University and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints really well.
I'm glad you bring that up, Liz. BYU is a unique institution, being a faith-based university. Has there been maybe questions from your fellow Big 12 colleagues now about what BYU is about in these meetings, when getting to know not only them, but getting to know BYU and you?
Yeah, we've had some really neat conversations. People ask really good questions, and it's been fun. It's been fun to be able to tell people more about BYU and more about the Church of Jesus Christ. And they're very sincere with their questions. And we've been able to ask questions of others as well in terms of what are the mission and values of their institutions. And I think that's one of the things that excites us is we feel like those align really well with these institutions and with the Big 12, is looking at the whole student athlete and building student athletes that can be leaders in their communities and all over the world. But it has been neat, and I'm excited for our student athletes and coaches to have even more of those opportunities as we get to know these institutions, to be able to represent and share more about our faith and more about BYU.
Last thing for you, Liz, Commissioner Bowlesby noted that he wants the new institutions like BYU to get familiar with the culture of the Big 12 from the meetings that you've had over the last 9 months with the different universities. What do you feel is maybe the culture of the Big 12 going forward?
Oh, I think there is a really high level of energy. There's a lot of unity already with these schools on getting to know each other and pushing forward. College athletics, as we all know, is undergoing a little bit of a identity crisis or trying to figure out how we forge ahead. And I feel a great deal of confidence as I've gotten to know the other SWAs and the athletic directors and the presidents I've gotten to know, a great deal of confidence that these are people in these rooms that care about student athletes. They care about college athletics. They want to make wise decisions to help college athletics be sustainable. And so when I think about the culture of the Big 12, I think of that. I think about these are really good people and institutions that care about student athletes as people, want to be excellent and want to win, want to do it the right way. And so that's exciting because that feels right up our alley. We feel like that's who we are too.
There you go. That's BYU Associate AD Liz Darger here on the Cougar Tracks podcast. I appreciated Liz and Tom Homo for taking the time to talk with me down in Texas. That was a great time at the Big 12 spring meetings. And there's just a lot of excitement in these fan bases, BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston. I saw Cincinnati today had their press conference discussing the transition to the Big 12, and they announced that season tickets for football sold out for the first time in their program's history. There's just a lot of potential and upside in this new Big 12 conference, and the new members will be at a prorated escalator revenue distribution the first couple of years, and then in 2025 they'll get a full cut of revenue. But there's bright days ahead for the new Big 12 conference. It'll be interesting to see what the future looks like for BYU baseball. They do know who their head coach is going to be. They promoted Trent Pratt. He gets elevated from interim head coach to the full-time head man. And Pratt is an interesting hire. I got to say, it's a move that could be a little bit risky potentially when you look at the fact that he doesn't have head coaching experience at all. And this is a move where you're now transitioning from the WCC to the Big 12. WCC is not a bad baseball league, but still limited in terms of resources. and you look at the RPI of where BYU finished this year at 104 in the RPI ratings, 8 of the 9 teams currently in the Big 12 finished better than BYU. And then 2 of the 3 teams from the AAC, they had better RPIs than BYU this year. Did Trent Pratt show enough to warrant that he should be promoted as the guy? The thing is that they were winless against Utah, and they lost to a lower seeded team in the WCC tournament. I thought that created a space to potentially expand the search a bit for Tom Hommel and Brian Santiago to kind of branch out and look at other potential candidates. But from a recruiting standpoint, Mike Littlewood's staff has done a great job, and Pratt has been part of that staff every step of the way. And you want to have that continuity there from a recruiting perspective. Littlewood did a bang-up job when it came to recruiting, and that is where you have to maintain things going forward. Will BYU be able to get elite talent into the Big 12 Conference? We'll see, because BYU baseball, out of all of the sports in BYU's athletic department profile, baseball just hasn't had those moments in the spotlight. They just haven't. It's a program that's really struggled, and they've been kind of out of sight and out of mind for many years. And the challenge of getting that program competitive in the Big 12, that's going to be a big, big challenge. And you're a cold weather team still. It's going to be fascinating to see what they do. But Pratt gets promoted as the full-time man, and he steps in as the head coach, and he's going to lead the charge into the Big 12 Conference for BYU. Before we wrap things up, BYU football got a commitment from Enoch Nawahine, Utah State running back transfer. BYU hasn't announced the move, which would tend to lend itself to this is likely a preferred walk-on commitment. We'll see there. But 3 years of eligibility. He's eligible immediately this year due to the transfer one-time undergrad rule. And he joins a running back room that includes Christopher Brooks, Lopini Katoa, Jackson McChesney, Hinckley Ropati, Miles Davis, Mason Fakahua, Bo Robinson, Austin Bell, Samson Peua, and Nukaluve Hilu. A lot of bodies, a lot of guys there. And Nawahine is the latest addition to BYU's running back room. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating and a review. It helps out the show a ton. And also download the KSL Sports app. You can check out all my bylines, my podcast, Cougar Sports Saturday, Cougar Tracks. It's all there on the KSL Sports app. I'll talk to you on Wednesday at high noon here on the Cougar Tracks podcast. It's always powered by KSLSports.com.